Well, good evening, everyone, and we'd like to welcome everyone to our October 20th, 2020 Douro-Dummer Council meeting. Good to see everyone on this fall day. And before we do get underway, I'll remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded on YouTube and live streamed on the Township's YouTube channel. Now, the closed session part of this meeting will not be live streamed, but the remainder of the meeting will be reflected in the minutes, which are the official record of the meeting. We'll be holding the meeting as though we are in the council chambers, and we'll follow our regular policies and procedures. We ask members of council to please raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and also raise your hand to vote. I will ask all those in favor, and then all those opposed to each motion. So I'd like now to call the roll. If you would simply raise your hand if you are here. First of all, Deputy Mayor Carl Moher. Carl, great. Councillor Watt. Thank you. Councillor Landsman. And Councillor Watson. Is Councillor Watson in the room? Okay, we do have a quorum. Staff are with us as well. Our temporary CAO, Martina Jade Hartwick, is here. Our chief building official, Brian Fawcett. Hi, Brian. Senior administrative assistant, Vanessa Sweeting, is here. She's behind the controls and taking the minutes. Administrative assistant, Nicole Zenner, has also got her finger on the buttons to help us all see the meeting properly tonight. And also with us tonight is acting CAO for Peterborough County, Sheridan Graham. Sheridan, welcome. And also the clerk of Peterborough County, Lynn Fawn. Lynn, thank you for joining us as well. I believe Heather is here now. Heather, a little wave would be nice. Okay, but Heather is with us in the meeting anyway. A reminder that staff will be turning off their cameras until they have the opportunity to answer a question or give a report. So with all council in attendance, I'll call the meeting to order. And we respectfully acknowledge that we're on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mishi, Sagig, and Ishibeg, and we offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. Please, would everyone join us for a moment of silent reflection? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest with any members of council with any of the items that we're dealing with tonight? Please raise your hand if that is the case. Okay, thank you. Seeing no hands. The agenda that is before you, a motion please to adopt that agenda. Councillor Landsman and Deputy Mayor Moher. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. The regular minutes from the October 6th meeting are also in your package, and a motion to receive and approve those minutes would be appropriate right now. Councillor Watt and Councillor Watson. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Any business arising out of those minutes? Go ahead, Carl. You're muted, Carl.
Okay, the one point I want to raise, I've noticed in the Lakeville Herald that we're advertising for 2 community center operators. And at our last meeting, I agreed to, and I think the rest of council agreed to, was 2 operators in total. In other words, our current assistant to the manager is an operator, plus 1 more, for a total of 2. Now, if we're looking for 2 additional, that would be 3 in total. And I guess my point is, because we're only opening 1 community center, And depending on where COVID is going, it might be a little bit premature to look for another operator at this moment. I think and we've advertised for a number of people to help out with the additional staff at the community centers. And I'm sure all the equipment that could go wrong is alarmed in such a fashion that an operator could be called by cell phone or pager or whatever. But to have operators there when we're open all the time, I think that goes way beyond what we need to have happen. That was my opinion of how it went last meeting.
Okay.
Maybe other members of council could either agree or not agree.
Martina, would this perhaps be wise to do in closed session, identifiable individuals?
I believe so, Mr. Mayor, because the decision was originally made in closed. I think we can discuss it in closed instead of in open session.
Okay, Carl, if that's acceptable, we will move you to item 17.1 in the closed session agenda and discuss that. Is that all right?
Well, we discussed it and agreed to what we wanted to do in open council at last meeting, but I guess because there's a.
Go ahead, Martina.
The reopening plans were discussed in open, but the staffing was discussed in closed.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll do that in closed session. No, that's fine. Any other business? Oh, sorry, Sheila had her hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. Just referring back to the minutes of last meeting and the meeting of September 15th, there were two items in there about the potential Santa Claus parade virtually or however it was going to be. And I just wanted to mention that Councillor Watt and I probably will have a draft of the video for you I'm going to say hopefully by the weekend. And I think it should be sent to council because I think you should see it.
Good. No, that's fine.
That's it.
And that's going to be shown on December council?
December 21st, the first portion of the council meeting. And it will be, I guess, a presentation. And I would suspect it could possibly be 10 minutes in length.
Okay, good. We look forward to that then. Anybody else? Business Horizon? Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, for you, you have any updates for us for what we're going to do for Remembrance Day?
Yes, I was going to bring that up under new business. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. No, I can wait till then. Thank you very much.
Good. Okay, seeing no more hands, delegations, presentations, public meetings, none tonight. Other business staff reports. Building permit fees review. And I believe Brian Fawcett, our CBO, is in attendance. And Brian, if you would like to take care of that, please.
Certainly. So before you, there is a report as well as a lengthy document for a fee study. Tonight, I'm just going to go very high level, introducing the report. This fee study is obviously new to council's eyes. And for the benefit of those in attendance that are watching, those documents can be found on the website as well. The fee study is comprehensive, reviews our budget requirements and the operating revenues of the department and suggests a path moving forward. So each year we establish the fees for this department, the building department, based on the intention of attaining complete cost recovery. The building department and the sewage department were separated in 2020 to create two separate departments. The sewage department is operating on full cost recovery right now. The building department is more subjected to the ebbs and flows of construction industry. And we're suggesting that the fees, the method of calculating the fees currently is a little convoluted, involving a square footage cost plus administrative costs. And we're recommending that that be changed to calculating based on reported construction value. The reported construction value is a calculatable number or can be self-reported by the applicant based on what they perceive their construction costs at real market value for the construction materials plus labor costs would be. In the event that they report a low value, we can determine that value using a guidebook called the RS means data, which basically is a statistical analysis of all of North America's construction data, and then it's localized for our region. There's an adjustment factor for that. The benefits of this, there's a whole host of benefits, but one of the benefits that I didn't really mention in the report is the ease at which the applicants would now be able to calculate their permit fees. If they know that their project is $500,000, they can easily multiply that by the number set for the fee rate and calculate their permit fee, which is not something that they're able to do right now very easily. So I drafted this fee study to analyze the current department operation requirements and budgets and establish this new method for fee implementation. And I would request the council take the opportunity to review this report and study it, to submit comments to me by November the 6th. And so that I have additional time to apply this information to a more lengthy evaluation on November 17th council meeting. We are suggesting a rate of $14.50 per $1,000 of construction value, which is lower than most of the other townships in the county, but still sufficient for us to raise the necessary funds. The other thing that I want to mention is that the building bylaw will also see some housekeeping updates, mostly relating to current methods that we use, such as electronic building permits that aren't in the fee schedule or in the bylaw now, as well as new fee schedules and some definitions and things like that. And I'll be bringing that bylaw back to council on the 2nd November meeting once I've received your feedback on the study report. So the recommendation that I would have before you is that the report dated October 13th regarding building permit fees review, as well as the attached study, be received. That council review the material and provide staff with comments before November the 6th, 2020.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Questions from members of council? Go ahead, Heather.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And through you, I just have a couple of questions about the schedule, the report that you've brought forward. You're proposing a 2-year reserve. Can you, I know you outlined the rationale of having a reserve, but it didn't seem to come through in your report why specifically 2 years as opposed to 1 or 3 or 5 or whatever.
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Mayor, the desire to have a 2-year reserve fund is sort of the norm across most municipalities, for the building department anyways. 2 years gives you ample revenue to shoulder the ebbs and flows of construction. So if you have down years, you can make that up over without having to drastically change the fees or dip into the tax reserves to cover deficits. Exceeding 2 years, some municipalities do. Some municipalities have 5-year reserve funds. But in order to get a 5-year reserve fund, we would either be looking at setting this current rate and looking at a 50-year collection period, or raising the rates so much higher in order to get to that point relatively quickly. So right now we have very little reserves. And as we'll see when we get through budgeting, that's going to take an impact this year, especially because this year is a bit of a slow year. So having those reserve funds is especially important.
Thank you. And just another question on the report. You identified a few different scenarios that you used to calculate to see how this proposal would play out. I'm curious about scenario number 3. It seems to be quite specific in its application, being a new medical center, and I'm just wondering why that particular scenario was used. Is there one that's in the works that you are able to cite and reference, or is it based on previous developments?
No, it's neither. The application of a medical center was really just a good example I could think of that sort of could potentially happen at some point. I mean, we never know if something like that were to come down the pipeline, but it's a good example because it's a controlled amount. It's not public. It's public money as opposed to private money that's driving that. So the tender process is most certainly in play there, and makes for the calculation of the fees to be very reasonable.
I see. And one final question, and I'll be darned if I can find it on the page. I think it's on page 20. It is. You referenced that it was determined that an average dwelling with finished basement with basic construction materials and average labor cost adjusted for the Peterborough area was determined to be $212.57 per square foot. Is that adjusted for today's construction cost, or what is that based on? Is it finished with driveway and septic tank? Because that seems a little higher than what I'm used to hearing contractors kind of quote.
Yeah, so those numbers all came from the RS Means Data Handbook, which is an annualized number based on the what is reported and what is analyzed in the industry. So they use industry analysis to analyze these numbers. They're not you certainly could have lower numbers than that, but it wouldn't be very common for those numbers to be much lower when you really do look at the grand scheme of the total costs. Yes, landscaping is included, septic fees, overhead, servicing, all of those sorts of things are included, and that is defined in construction cost, which you'll see a definition of that when we get to the building bylaw at the next, when I bring that back.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. Carl, go ahead. You're muted, Carl.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much for the detailed report. It's an interesting concept, and there's a lot of good things in it. I have a number of questions, and rather than, like, I'm not a CBO, and I think one of the things that I'm going to recommend is this, I think this is big enough to consider a special meeting or a near future committee of the whole to maybe debate some of the issues that are in here. Rather than each one individually come back to you with individual ideas. I guess I'd like to see what Councillor Watson might have to say further, Councillor Watt and Councillor Sheila Lansman, because this is, and not being a CBO, I think we need your comments, yay or nay, when we make some of our suggestions. Mr. Mayor, that's what my suggestion would be, to we could fit it in over the next couple of weeks to, if other members of council agree.
Well, I'll suggest that you put a motion on the floor, Carl, and then I'll hear from Sheila and Tom and Heather on how they feel about it, and we can
Okay.
debate it. Go
Well,
ahead.
I move to receive the report with thanks, and that we book ourselves a meeting to discuss this and maybe another item or whatever, kind of sort of a committee of a whole to discuss this in more detail for more meaningful as a team. Back to Brian.
Could I have a second to that motion then, Sheila? Okay. Sheila, Tom, Heather, let's hear your view on that. Go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read the report, Brian, and I read it twice actually, and I do think it's a good idea if we have a number or a special meeting to discuss it, because there are a lot of things that do raise questions, and it would take up this whole council meeting, I'm sure. But I would be in favor of a special meeting.
You're supporting the motion then? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Other members of council, any comments? Heather, go ahead.
I would echo that. I certainly am not an expert in the field, and we rely on staff to guide us on these things. I think the report is really well presented, but I do have questions which kind of raise some opportunity for debate and discussion potentially. So I would support that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I agree fully. It's a very, very comprehensive report. Thank you very much. But it's a lot to digest, and there's probably questions in there that all of council has that, we're not quite clear on. And like was already said, we could probably spend the next hour here trying to debate everything like that, where a special meeting just designated for this would be very appropriate.
Okay, we've all pretty well said exactly the same thing, so we'll call for the vote. And the motion is to call a special meeting to discuss this and other matters that need more thorough discussion. And that is the motion that's on the floor. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved, and I will ask staff to set up a meeting in the very near future to discuss that and get a handle on it. Okay, thank you very much. 9.2 is the low-level deck policy from the building department. And Brian, you are on deck. Go ahead.
So at the October 6th council meeting, a notice of motion was received with a seconder to ask staff to review the possibility of creating a policy to exempt low-level decks under 12 inches from natural existing grade from the requirements of building code, citing another number of other municipalities that do this currently. My comments that I've been on site as a building official to the collapse and failure of numerous decks, the leading percentage of which were built without permits. Regardless of the height of the deck, be a two-story deck or a low-level deck, the potential for serious injury and death is significant enough that the liability from these types of construction cannot be overstated. It's a balancing act for municipalities to determine how to enforce all the provisions of the Building Code Act. As an example, following the strictest letter of the law, permits for replacing roof finishes could technically be required, although we presently don't enforce those requirements, and I don't believe most municipalities in our area do either. Similarly, permits for replacing or repairing basement waterproofing is not required by our municipality, but is by others. The municipalities that I'm aware of that do not require low-level deck permits are all large municipalities, which can often bear the cost of an expensive litigation. They weigh the balancing costs of enforcing the building code for these low-level decks against the cost that it would take to settle these lawsuits. As an example, it's often cheaper for them to pay out a few lawsuits, and amounting to a couple $100,000 each year. As an example, obviously, we don't know what those lawsuits can amount to. But rather than try and spend that money on staffing and extra legal fees to enforce those code provisions. As a small municipality, we benefit from the revenue of these decks, and we have the resources to enforce these types of projects. As another point, the zoning bylaw is very strict as it relates to construction around the waterways, which occupies a large portion of our properties within our township. Coupling that with the fact that Orca Development Control Area touches nearly every property in the township, there's a very high likelihood for confusion to the public if we were to stop requiring building permits for certain decks, as they still have to comply with the zoning bylaw and they still need Orca permits. So us not requiring permits for some things may cause confusion in that regard. Our current policy is that decks under 6 inches be considered landscaping under the zoning bylaw. If the deck is considered to be located more than 1.5 meters away from any other structure and is under 10 meters squared, it wouldn't require a building permit under the building code. Decks which are adjacent to other buildings, even though most people often will perceive that as being its own independent structure, is actually considered an addition to that building, whether it's fastened to the building or not. It often forms part of the exiting system, and it would never be exempt from the permitting requirements regardless of the size. So in summary, the decks, regardless of height or size, are a point of liability for everyone involved, including homeowners, contractors, and especially the municipality. And based on the reasons that I provided in this report, I don't see any reasonable reason for considering the exclusion of low-level decks under 12 inches from natural grade to be considered exempt from the building code requirements within the township of Douro-Dummer at this time.
Thank you, Brian. Let's open it up to questions about that report. It's all about risk. Sheila, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just can't see how a deck 12 inches or less can cause so much injury if somebody falls from it, or I can't see it collapsing, so to speak. And I went online to go through the Ontario Building Code to see about deck guards, and I thought I read that if a deck is a new or replacement under 24 inches above finished grade, a permit is not required. And I guess I'm just saying 12 inches doesn't really seem that much. I think it's probably 8 inches, excuse me, to step up onto my dock. I don't understand it.
Response, Brian?
Yeah, unfortunately, Ontario, through their emergency system, doesn't track medical data such like the States does. So the numbers, the statistics that I'm about to kind of provide are American statistics, but I think we would agree that they very correlate to our region. Slip, trips, and falls on decks are one of the leading causes of injury in construction. So the improper stair heights lack of railings, even if they're not required railings. So in the building code, if the deck surface to grade within 4 feet is less than 23 5/8 of an inch, which is 600 millimeters, then no guardrail is required. And that's a
That's right.
guardrail is the mechanism that's designed to prevent you from falling off of that deck. So, I mean, I have a deck at home that's that height. I worry sometimes about my kids getting too close to the edge because of the height of it, but it is code compliant. But the slip, strips, and falls off of that height can be devastating for elderly people, for young people, for intoxicated people. It's a reality. It's not something that we'd like to think doesn't happen, but it can happen. So the problem is not that we don't want to issue permits for them or that we want to exempt people from them. The problem is that we make an active decision to say we are not going to require permits for these projects, and somebody has an accident, slips, trips, falls, breaks their hip, breaks an arm, has a concussion, something like that, and we went out and superseded the Ontario Building Code, which is a provincial standard, and say we're not going to require permits for these systems, we would now be at fault, at liability. And of course, under joint and several liability, we would bear the brunt of that litigation. So that would be my primary concern with altering the requirements of the building code.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting, Brian, that you mentioned altering the building code. I too did a little bit of research on this, and I was wondering how it's even possible to safely build a 12-inch or under deck and be compliant if we were to go forward with this. Just considering standard construction, if you have deck blocks, you're going to be at about 2 inches plus the 2x10 beam, plus the 2x8 floor joist depths and all that kind of stuff. It makes it really difficult to keep it at 12 inches safely and construct it properly, notwithstanding any grade variance. At one corner it could be precisely at 12 inches and the next corner it could be at 13 inches, and now they're non-compliant just because of that. When you mentioned the OBC, I also referenced the National Building Code, which also specifies 23 7/8 or under 24 inches, as my councillor colleague mentions. And I wonder if the liability would be mitigated if Deputy Mayor Moher's motion was altered to actually read 23 7/8 to be below that 24-inch threshold. And therefore, should any liability occur, the argument would be safe to be made that we're just putting the same compliance requirements on that are required by the National and OBC.
Brian, response?
Yep. So under the building code requirements, a building is defined as a building consisting of a floor, roof, walls, or any of the above, occupying an area greater than 10 square meters. So it's the area, it's not the height that has the bearing on whether or not it's a building. A deck of any size over 10 square meters is considered a building. A deck adjacent to an existing building, such as a house or a cottage, of any size is considered an addition to that building, unless it's basically butted up against the building, but wouldn't be accessed from the exit. Like if it's a large deck or a corner deck or something like that comes off of the back door, then that would be considered part of the exiting system, and it's an addition to that building regardless of the size of it. So the building code requirements are pretty clear, in my opinion, in terms of what is required for a deck when a deck is being constructed, that all decks do require building permits regardless of their height. Even a flush to the grade deck would still require a building permit if it's up against a building or if it's over 10 square meters in height, because it is a floor and it's over 10 square meters, therefore it meets the definition of a building under the Act, which then poses it to the building code requirements and the regulation. As far as the height of 23 5/8, the reason why other municipalities pick that number is because that's the height at which a guard is required. And there's special construction requirements for decks that are under that height threshold, such as that they can be, if they're under 55 square meters, which is 560 square feet, then they can be floating, which means that they don't need a a frost protected foundation, as long as they're detached from any other structure. There's a whole host of other requirements and that sort of thing. And just in terms of constructing a low level deck, like a 12-inch deck that's to be code compliant, if it had railings on it, the minimum joist thickness is a 2x8. If it didn't have railings, then you could go down to a 2x6, depending on the spans. And the beams can be mounted such that they're like this, and the joists come into the side. That's called face mounting, as opposed to what you're thinking of, where it's a drop beam, where the beam is underneath and the joists are sitting on top, overhanging. So a face mounted beam consisting of a 2x8 with a joist, it's a 2x8 or a 2x10, would certainly meet that under 12-inch requirement. The footings can be like a cottage pad in that circumstance, especially if it's a floating deck. So they would add minimally to the height, or they can be sunk into the grade. So the challenge that we find sometimes with these decks, and I can cite a number of them within our municipality, is that it's how do you define that grade requirement? Because somebody's always going to say, oh, well, it's under 12 inches there, so I just built the grade up a little bit, and now it doesn't need a permit. But when the grade is sloping off at such a remarkable amount that you fall off that, and then you're rolling down the hill and into the swimming pool. So it's just sort of it's a bit of a slippery slope, and it's like, where do you draw the line and where do you don't? And that's why I personally would just prefer to stick to the building code requirements as opposed to trying to alter them. I think we're just opening up ourselves to a whole bunch of liability that we don't need.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And Carl, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I was the one that did the research on this, and I have more information that other members of council and staff might have an interest in. Ontario municipalities that do not require a permit for these low-level uncovered decks under 24 inches are as follows. There are cities of Kitchener, London, Kingston, Markham, Cambridge, Oshawa, and towns like Port Hope and Cobourg. Woodstock is under 12-inch. Back about September last year, I had occasion to spend a couple hours to kill in Whitby, and I went to the CBO office there and was lucky enough to sit down with an experienced CBO that I was able to inquire about the decks, and I inquired about why this under 12 or under 24 that you don't have decks. And he says that there was a court challenge in the GTA. He thought it was in Etobicoke in recent years, where somebody, Toronto had a requirement for a building permit, and the applicant appealed to the courts, and it was thrown out. And since that time, many of these cities, that's the reason why they went to the exemption for the low-level decks, because of the 23.7/8 in the Ontario Building Code. Because the building code is somewhat silent on everything under that level. And the court challenge, he thought it was Etobicoke. So, and I guess on the liability issue, I guess if we don't give a permit, how could we be liable if we're not out there? Just because a permit may not be required, the construction company or the property owner still have an obligation to ensure the deck is safe, or could be liable on themselves for what they did. And if we're involved, yes, we're going to be named, but if we're not involved, it's going to be the property owner's liability insurance in total that would have to carry it. So respectfully, I hear you, a relative, but I don't agree with you. So that's my position.
Okay, everyone is entitled to their position. Is there any more discussion on that? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. My thought on them, just personally, and I mean, I'm just going to throw this off the top of my head. For collapsing, like anything 12 inches or lower, it's not going to collapse because it's probably going to be a 2x8 or a 2x10 with a board on top of it that's going to be solid to the ground. So there's no way it's going to collapse. Stepping down off of 12 inches, I don't think that's crazy. I mean, I can step off a 4-inch and break my ankle, or I can step off a 12-inch and break my ankle. I don't really see, in my mind, a problem with this. And as Deputy Mayor Moore just said, I'm not sure whether we're going to have any liability on this if we're not named in it, or if we didn't issue a permit and it wasn't done properly.
Okay, no, thank you for the comment. I think the issue is that we're not building officials and we're not lawyers, so that's where I have a bit of a conflict. But ultimately, it's council who will make the decision on this. Carl, one more comment?
I'll just move to receive the report.
Okay, and a seconder to that, please. Heather? Any comment on that motion? It's only to receive the report. All in favor? All opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, Brian. 9.3 is the employee benefit renewal. And Martina, are you going to review this? And I understand that staff need a little bit of time to do research on this because of COVID and all those things. It's been very difficult. So Martina, go ahead.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, this is Darlene's report, but as you know, she's unable to be with us this evening. So November 1st of each year, the township's Manulife benefit package renews. Mosey & Mosey is our benefit plan consultant, and they negotiate the rates for us. Manulife's proposal renewal cost would have resulted in an increased annual premium of 13.3% or $26,183 for the township of Douro-Dummer. But as a result of Mosey & Mosey's negotiating with Manulife, the finalized renewal rate has an annual adjustment of 8.9% or $17,509. There is a chart that was attached to this report that breaks down where those increases come from. So we're part of the county's group, which helps us with our pooled rating for life, long-term disability, accident and death benefits, and our employee assistant plan, as well as our experience rating for weekly indemnity and health and dental. If we're not part of the county's group, one large claim could affect our rate significantly. Being part of the county group does not mean that all of the townships have the same benefit package. Our township has strived to reduce our rates by introducing several cost-saving factors, such as capping dispensing fees, mandatory generic drugs, 1 pair of orthotics a year, semi-private hospital coverage, and others. Other factors that affect the township's cost of benefits are the age of employees, salary increases, and staff increases. These factors will increase costs and could be a significant influence. The following statement was included in the last compensation negotiation, that the benefit costing be presented to council every 2 years prior to the renewal date. This presentation will focus on the cost of the benefits using 4 most current actual rates to determine an average premium increase and what, if any, actions will be necessary. The 4-year average premium increase from 2017 is 5.64%. 2017's increase was 6.3%. 2018 was 4.1, 2019 was 6.8, and 2020 is 8.06. These increases include the addition of 5 full-time staff and 3 part-time employees who became eligible for benefits. The recommendation that's before you is that the report be received and that council approve the 2021 Manulife Health Benefit Policy, which comes into effect on November 1st.
Okay, thank you, Martina. It's open for council comments. That is the suggested motion before you from staff. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Martina. Mr. Mayor's comments earlier about negotiations around COVID reminded me that earlier on in this year, I raised the suggestion to go back to the benefit provider to see if we could get some sort of rebate or discounts because the redemption rate was lower because all the facilities were closed. And I believe that resulted in some sort of savings for 2020.
That's correct.
Is there something that's in the works looking forward into 2021, or is this where it's at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff haven't looked into what will happen for 2021 should COVID continue. So that's something that council could direct staff to look into.
And I might add that we have been extremely shorthanded with staff, as everyone knows, who would emphasize that subject area. There's virtually no one to do that. Carl, go ahead.
Thank you, Martina, for the report. I have a number of things that I'm concerned about. Last December, when the current agreement was signed, there was a undesirable clause in that agreement for sharing of premium increases that no one wanted and wanted to get rid of. And part of that was part of that discussion was between now and then was to develop some kind of language or some kind of a process for controlling the costs a little bit better. And I don't see that in any of the proposal here. And I hear the mayor relative to no one to get involved with that, but I guess from my standpoint, it's basically got to happen, because when you look at the numbers here, I don't think Darlene is exactly right on the pooling. She is for all the items except for the health and dental. The health and dental, we're on our own. And right now we're about 20% above the county on the extended health. And that's the prescription drugs, the paramedicals, and so on. And the increase this year and for our extended health, which represents about 60% of the increase, is it's $11,000. And the extended health is up 13%, 12.9, and last year it was up 31%. So I guess between now and a year from now, we've got to figure out some way to harness those costs or share the costs of them in some fashion, because they seem to be running rampant. We got to be very supportive of a plan that provides support for our people. However, these kind of increases, we're out of sync with others, and I guess that's my position on it. You know, maybe I didn't hear it right, but I understood there was going to be some kind of an alternate plan come forward for replacement of the plan that no one wanted.
Martina, did you want to comment? I just want to reiterate that right now we have no staff to even talk about this, who know what to do about this or who to contact. And that's our issue going on right now. Martina?
So that, as for what Deputy Moher just brought up, having an alternate plan, I do remember discussions, but I don't remember a resolution. So I can go back and review all of those meeting notes and minutes so that we can see exactly what was on the books, and then bring that back to council in a future meeting.
Good.
If that would be sufficient, because I'm not sure off the top of my head, and I don't want to provide incorrect information.
Yeah, let's try to dig into it. Carl's got some real good points here, and we've got to get on this and many other things too. A follow-up, Carl?
Yes, it's too late to do anything for November 1st when this is effective.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would have a motion, when you're ready for a motion,
Go ahead.
that we approve this and that we look before next renewal by September 1 next year, that we have some kind of a template or model to be able to look at how we can lower or how we can better be more fiscally sustainable in extended health and other factors in our benefit plan.
That's fair. I think that's a fair motion. Seconder to Carl's motion, Tom?
Yeah, I'll second it with a comment if I could, please.
Go ahead.
I hear what's going on back and forth here, and there was a good point made. You know, there's 5 new employees on top of this, which, you know, no doubt is going to put up our costs. And, you know, with our service review that we've done, that could increase even more depending on what way we go. So we have to be really, really cognizant of the fact that there is more employees on this also, not just an increase over what we had before.
Carl?
Just a point of clarity, the additional employees are already in the current cost. So the increase includes them already.
Includes them already. Yeah.
They're already included. If you look at your chart, you'll see the number or the volume. You'll see the number of families, the number of single, and so on. Those are already in there, Tom.
Okay, we got a motion on the floor to get a handle on this within the very near future. Too late for the coming year, but we've got to get this solved. So, Martina?
Could I just have Deputy Mayor Mohert clarify the motion? I just want to make sure I have his wording accurate.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead.
do you want me to read what I have,
Sure.
Deputy Mayor? Okay. So that the report dated October 14th regarding the employee benefit renewal be received and that council approve the 2021 benefit policy, which comes into effect November 1st, and that by September 1st, 2021, a model be brought back to lower the cost of the package and have fiscal sustainability of the plan. Is that correct?
Yes. General
Does that
terms.
cover it, Carl?
That's a high level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's good with that? The seconder is okay with that motion? Okay, we're going to call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. We move to 9.4, and that is the council meeting schedule. Nicole, you were there buried in the background somewhere, pushing the buttons. You prepared this report. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is all.
Okay, the report is self-explanatory, setting the schedule for 2021. Go ahead, Heather.
Your Worship, I move to receive and accept the report as presented.
Thank you. A seconder to that, please. Sheila? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, that motion is approved. 9.5, the Warsaw Spring Bridge closure. This has caused a considerable amount of angst amongst our ratepayers and others in the county, with the city closing some of the routes into East City once the Park Hill Road was closed. And I guess the whole premise of it is Douro-Dummer or Peterborough County or Autonomy South Monaghan, who are very much affected with these closures and these detours, were never consulted. Were never told about what the plans were and had nothing to do with it until it all happened. And now we have residents who've been using that route for the last 20 years getting tickets for $110 from the Peterborough Police. So it's caused quite an issue. And as our council representing our ratepayers in Douro-Dummer and Peterborough County, we are indeed rather upset about it. So Martina has given you a basic report. Martina, maybe you could just review what it is you've outlined.
Sure, Ms. Brick. So much of what you said is in my report as well, and I just wanted to bring the concerns regarding this bridge closure and the detours to council's attention. Since the closure started on October 5th, we've had a large stream of phone calls and emails from concerned ratepayers and concerned travelers about the detours and the effect this is having on their access to employment, childcare, daily tasks, and healthcare. The detours were put in place without, and they're not meeting the needs of our residents and businesses. There may be other options, but without sitting down with the city, county, Autonomy South Monaghan, and other partners, we have no way of finding out whether those options are viable or not, or if they can be put in place. So this report is before you to seek direction from council on working with our partners to get some clarity on this issue and see if there's ways that we can improve the transportation routes for all of our residents and businesses.
Okay, thank you, Martina. And that's all fine and good having a meeting, but we do have to know that the city are receptive to it and are willing to come up with some kind of a compromise. If that's not on the table, then I think we have even more of a problem. Heather, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I have heard from an unprecedented number of residents as well as businesses in our community and have had conversations with representatives from Parks Canada, city councillors, and beyond. As I'm sure many of my colleagues have, this is something I support wholeheartedly. I agree we should have been consulted from the beginning, and we're not. And we need to be part of trying to find a solution. They've created a problem. And generally speaking, we're in the business of finding solutions, I like to think. So I would follow the recommendation, move that we follow the recommendation on the report, and we do so in a very expedient fashion because it's going to be a long winter. while they work on that bridge if we don't have a workable route. If city or other partners are looking for some suggestions of possible ways to solve this, I have a laundry list of ideas that have come to me from residents who are very familiar with the routing and have to cope with what has been foisted upon the neighborhood. So I will definitely make that motion and hope the rest of my colleagues will support that.
Okay, and that was very well said, and I think we all have received a huge list of perhaps compromises, but again, I'll say it before, if there's no willingness on the city's part to sit down and come up with a compromise, then we're all wasting our time. So that's what has to be done. Carl, go ahead, and then Sheila.
Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you very
sorry,
much.
we'll have to get a seconder. Heather made that motion, a good motion. And who is going to be the seconder to that motion? Sheila? Okay, go ahead, Carl.
Yes, it's been very frustrating dealing with this. And it's, even if we knew in advance that it was going to occur, and to have police officers out there ticketing people is just beyond insult, because many of these people have been using that route for absolutely years. Myself included, we've always used the old Norwood Road and the underpass at Liftlock, because we have commerce in the city of East City and downtown. We try to support those businesses, and just with the awkwardness of this, it's just awkward. And even University Road has become such a traffic jam here. We have now complaints from residents that can't get out on the road for a long time at a time. And like, I guess in order to motivate the city to do something, or to consider our what's going on in or what our needs are, ratepayer needs, it's ratepayers that want to spend money in the city of Peterborough. And to do this is discouraging that. So like, you'd be tempted to almost say, well, let's make University Road a local road. We know that the parkway in the city of Peterborough has not been built. It's been on the books for 50 odd years. The parkway has, in place of it, has become University Road, and there's roads in Selwyn that become alternates as well. And the city just go merrily along and say, well, that's okay, it's your road and whatever. And we've accommodated the people getting to Trent and other places. People need to get to their employment, but this is totally ridiculous. And to have a business down 30%, like a major employer in our location, down 30%. Most businesses that are profitable want to see a 30% profit, roughly. So in order for them to continue to be profitable, they have no choice. They've got to lay off people. And they probably have forecasted material in that they planned on selling, that's all of a sudden it's going to become dated. So there's other costs that way. Like, how they can have total no regard for that. I think the other thing is, perhaps if there is a meeting, we probably should have Parks Canada in it too, because maybe we need to build a Bailey Bridge over top of the construction at the canal, because like, we can get a bunch of fill in there temporary for 8 months. Like 10,000 cars is a significant amount, and or on the sides or whatever, because something's got to be done. I also dropped into some of the customers in East City, the business people there, and they're very concerned as well. Dropped into a friend of mine is the owner operator of the Sullivan's Drugstore, and he's losing customers as a result of it. These are customers in the Donwood area that they just find it too awkward to go to Trent University and then down River Road, because that's a busy traffic route. So they're having no choice but to move their business to another. No business wants to lose business these days. They've just come through COVID, which has affected many, many people. We've got to do something to get their attention. Maybe we have a delegation to a council meeting. We've got to do something. Here are my thoughts.
Good. And Heather's motion, I believe, speaks to all that. I think it's a sad day in July when the city would make such moves and not notify us or the county with anything to do with it. And our residents are suffering greatly. And this is totally, totally unacceptable. Okay, last comment, Sheila, go ahead. The motion's on the floor. Speak to the motion, please.
Yes, just I'm wondering if possibly, as Carl mentioned, possibly Parks Canada should be included in Heather's motion.
What did you mention in your motion, Heather?
I believe the CAO's report was our partners, and I would see Parks Canada as being one of those partners.
Yeah,
if we
I
need
would-
to name them
yeah.
specifically,
I
then
assume
so
it's-
be it.
Okay.
But
That's fine.
Okay, I would also suggest that staff work with county staff who are doing exactly that right now. And I think we need to combine forces to get our point across. Okay, that motion's on the floor. I'm delighted to see we're all on the same page here. And I'll call for the motion. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. That motion is approved. Item 9.6 is Peterborough Green Up, a request for support. Martina, are you going to speak to that? It's self-explanatory as well.
Yeah, so Peterborough Green Up had sent us a request. They are looking to submit a funding application to the federal government for the Climate Action and Awareness Fund to further their actions under the SUN program. So that's the program that has built multiple rain gardens in the Warsaw community area. So they're looking for a letter of support, and they would also like to know whether we'd be willing to sit on their implementation committee, which would probably work out to about 25 hours a year for 2 years, which would equal about a 2,500 in-kind contribution. So all of the breakdowns are in front of you, along with their funding application information and outlines of the project. So the recommendation is that a letter of support be provided. The township sit on the local project advisory committee, and that council approve an in-kind contribution of $2,500 towards the project.
Councillor Watson?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the work that they've been doing in our community is fantastic. I know yourself, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, you were both at the Back Dam Park for a bit of a celebration about a month or so ago to see some of the great work that they've done there. I definitely support the recommendation, although, and would move the recommendation, although I am concerned about comments, Mr. Mayor, you had made earlier about staffing resources being somewhat short. So if it's a concern that we don't have the staff resources readily available or a volunteer within staff to do that, then I personally would volunteer my time to
That's
be
great.
that individual if there's somebody on staff who is, if staff are unable to do that. So
I
I'll
would
move the
much,
recommendation.
I would prefer that actually, and if Heather is willing to put that effort into this, which is a very worthy cause, I'd like to see that part of the motion, and that Heather be the township's representative. Is someone going to second that motion? Carl? Good,
Yep.
thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Great project.
All opposed?
Things happen quickly when you volunteer.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
No, I know. No, good for you. Good for you
It's
for
like,
doing
boom,
that,
boom,
Heather.
done.
That's a very, very important thing for us to be involved in, and thank you for doing that. Okay, committee minutes, other reports. Police Service Board letter is before you. The Police Service Board did meet today and discuss this issue. The basic concept, which is indeed supported by the OPP, is to have a speed reduction coming all four ways to our four-way stop at Highway 28 and Warsaw Road. It is a very obvious safety concern the way cars come through to that light. And this would be to reduce that speed slightly in that area as they get to the lights, and then it would go back to 80. So the Police Service Board indeed did endorse this, as did the OPP. And we're after a motion from council to also endorse it. We'll have to also go to the county. Carl?
Move to receive and support.
Thank you. Seconder, Heather?
And with a comment,
Go ahead, Carl.
I'll
And
second it
then
with a
Heather,
question, but
go ahead.
go ahead.
I just noticed the signs that we requested going up at Highway 28 and Division Road are in the ground now, it's the posts. So it should be very shortly that the warning signs will be up for that
Yes.
intersection.
Yep. And that's got pretty high numbers accident wise, by the way,
Yeah.
which was acknowledged today too. Sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Thank you. I did ask staff this a little bit earlier, but I think it was, we were waiting for your meeting to happen today. Mr. Mayor, you say all 4 ways. What is the speed reduction kind of lead up zone that we're talking about? Are we talking at like an 80 to a 70 in all 4 directions, 80 to a 60? Do we have those
Yeah, I think
specifications at this point?
it's 80 to 60, Heather, but don't quote me on it. The OPP and everyone has it analyzed, but I thought it was 60,
Sure.
but
And again, just to be clear, I support the motion, but not if it's going to turn, all of County Road 4 east of Highway 28 into a 60 zone either, right?
No, I don't.
We're just talking about a kilometer or so leading up to it, I'm
Yeah, we're
assuming,
just a
or
short
however
distance.
the standard is.
a short distance
Yeah.
before the intersection to make sure they're slowed down and then go whipping right through the lights without seeing it.
Yeah,
This
I
has been
agree that
analyzed by
that's
the
case.
OPP. It's not me saying this.
No, and I agree fully, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that that's what in fact I was agreeing to, because the report and the letter was a little unclear. So thank you. I appreciate that clarity. And
Okay, it's
I
going
do
to take a
second that
while.
motion.
Obviously, this has got to go through all kinds of red tape, but at least we're on it now. So, Carl, you made that motion, and
Yes.
Heather is the seconder. All in favor? All opposed? Motion is approved. Bylaws, none. We have action items. We have 3 of them. The first being 12.1, the City of St. Catharines requesting alterations to the development approval requirements for landfills, Bill 197. Carl?
Due to the limited information that I have, I would move to receive it only.
Receive a second to that from Tom. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, thank you. The Ministry of the Solicitor General. This is about the anti-racism initiatives of the ministry and the anti-racism directorate, the regulatory work being done to bring the Community Safety and Policing Act into force and new police oversight. What is your pleasure on that letter? Go ahead, Heather.
I'll move to receive and support that. I'm certain that the OPP are well underway and moving forward with that regardless. So yes, I'll move to
Receive and support from Heather. Thank you. Carl? Seconded. Carl, you're muted.
I'll second it.
Good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All in favor? That motion is approved. And last but not least, the town of Wasaga Beach requesting Premier Ford to increase penalties and fines for participants in unauthorized car rallies to ensure the safety of the community. That's all, of course, tied into the incident they had just a few weeks ago. Heather?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to receive and support it. I did follow with interest the situation that occurred up in Wasaga Beach. There's a lot of points in that motion from the town of Wasaga Beach that gives municipalities a little bit more power to be able to enforce these things when they're catching wind of them before it happens, things like shutting down their town borders and what have you. So I think it adds strength to municipalities if such an instance were to occur there. So I support that.
It could happen to us someday as well. Okay, that is moved by Heather to support. A seconder to that, please. Sheila?
And I would like to make a comment. I agree with all the recommendations that they're putting in generally, but some of them seem a little bit heavy-handed. And but the whole thought is good, and I will support it for that.
So you're supporting it after
Yes.
that? Yeah? Okay. That motion is made and is seconded. Any other comment? All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Okay, we go to correspondence information items 13.1 to 13.4. Green Up, Peterborough Green Up Appreciation Letter. We have a quarterly report about waste management. We have Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and a note from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. A motion, please, to receive the correspondence under item 13. Tom? And Sheila is a seconder. Discussion? Carl? You're muted, Carl.
Need more practice. Just wanted to comment on the garbage report. Just for the other information of other councillors, Havelock, Bell, Methuen, Otonabee, South Monaghan, and Selwyn are coming on the clear bag very, very soon. So that should help big time. I'm not sure why Cavan and Monaghan are still high per capita, but we'll have to punish them a bit at the county council meeting. But and the other other question I had, and that had to do with the question regarding regarding projects requiring a comprehensive environmental assessment. I don't know whether Brian or Martina have had a chance to go through that to see if there's any reduction in some of the requirements to get those for development. In the past, sometimes EAs seem to be a little bit overboard regarding the requirements. Has there been any modification of that you've noticed, or where can we find more information about what's in it for the future?
Go ahead, Martina.
I can circulate additional information about this document and the EA process. There are some reductions in the process and some streamlining that is taking place. It won't have too large of an effect in our township because we don't see the types of large mega projects that need these types of large EAs. We see smaller construction projects, whether that be small commercial projects or residential projects. They don't typically fall under the EA framework, but I can circulate more information about this.
And just a further comment on that same subject, environment, the source water protection. At our last ORCA meeting, there was information about changes there coming down the pipe. And I wrote it to Martina. It may affect our works with the storage of snow because it could add cost and time to where we put it and what we do with it. So.
Okay, thank you, Carl. The motion is indeed on the floor. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. Accounts up to September 26th, 2020 is before you. A motion to receive and approve those accounts by Heather and seconded by Tom. Is there any discussion on the motion? Carl.
The Halls Glen rezoning appeal, the LLF lawyer's account, is that resolved now? I haven't seen anything come back. I think their hearing was going to be in September.
Go ahead, Martina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that issue is not resolved at the moment.
So the lawyer's bill is being added to.
It may be added to in the future.
Which is substantial.
Yes.
Okay, motion's on the floor. Any other discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved. We go ahead to notices of motion. Carl had a notice of motion that was laid out at the last meeting and was duly seconded. Carl, is that notice of motion still appropriate?
Yes, I feel it's still appropriate unless other members of council have some enhancements to make to it, but I feel we should proceed with it. And
Okay.
I was quite surprised when I sat down with the building official in Whitby that it wasn't liability that backed away from it. It was the precedent that was set by municipality. I think it was Etobicoke.
Okay, it's going to be up to members of council how they feel about this. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Mr. Mayor, I would propose a friendly amendment to the motion if my colleagues would allow, I would look at changing the verbiage at the very last sentence. Instead of saying 12 inches height or less above current earth grade, to read below 23 7/8 inches above current earth grade.
Well, that is a notice of motion. Carl, what's your thought on it?
I don't have any problem with that. I don't know
Okay.
if the seconder does or not.
Now, Martina, just technically speaking, do we have the power to change a notice of motion that has been previously agreed to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think a friendly amendment could be made if both the mover and the seconder would
Okay.
be open to that suggestion.
That's fine, just double checking. Carl, that's okay with you?
Yes.
So that is the amendment that is made to that notice of motion. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I believe I was the seconder at the last meeting. So is that what you meant, Martina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I had Councillor Landsman as the seconder in the
Oh,
minute.
okay. Sorry.
Okay, that's the notice
that's
of
fine.
motion then. We're going to call for the vote. Everyone is totally understanding what they're doing then. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion is approved. Move ahead to announcements. If anyone else has any community announcements, I'll just do a real quick review of the Remembrance Day plans. Our volunteer committee has met a couple of times now, and we are going to be conducting a virtual Remembrance Day service. We are certainly abiding by provincial rules, Royal Canadian Legion rules, to not have any kind of a crowd congregating at the cenotaph. But we will be producing the normal service that we would normally do, except it is going to be virtual. We have a great little committee who have volunteered their services. David Feely, Andy Tuff, Paula Cowing, and our staff, Jessica MacArthur, have joined forces, and we have been recording various segments of the service, including students from our two schools who are reading poems, and they will be inserted into the video production as well. So the whole day will not see anyone at the cenotaph. The whole idea is to keep people separated, and that is what we're going to do. So it's going to be live on YouTube starting at about 10 to 11 on the 11th of November. And we're going to publicize it to the best of our ability, each and every way we possibly can. There's going to be a large sign put down at the cenotaph reminding people that they can watch it on YouTube, either live or recorded. And with any luck at all, next year we can get back to our normal process. So that's what we're doing, and we continue to make those preparations. So that's the announcement about that, and I appreciate the hard work by our volunteers to make that happen. Okay, anybody have any other announcements? I think we're good to go. We keep motoring through this COVID-19 and doing the best that we can all do to keep people safe. Okay, I am going to ask for a motion to go into closed session. This is about personal matters, identifiable individuals. Could I have that motion, please, Sheila? And Tom, all in favor? All opposed? Thank you. That motion is approved. We're going to take just a very quick break while staff stop the recording, and you'll see a graphic. Just maybe mute yourselves and your video, and we'll be back